Hello everyone. My name is Kate, I'm 38 years old, and I once believed in fairy tales. I believed that love could save a person, that kindness could change someone's soul. Now I'm a woman whose body carries the scar of both a surgery and a betrayal. I tell this story not for pity, but as a warning, because monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they smile, hold your hand, and whisper that you're the best thing that ever happened to them. It all started 3 years ago when I met Daniel. He wasn't the kind of man who turned heads instantly, not movie star handsome, not flashy, but he had a quiet charm that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We met at a blood donation drive at the local hospital where I volunteered every Saturday. I was helping check forms when he walked up, tall, gentle smile, slightly nervous. He had this soft voice that felt safe. "Hey," he said, sliding the paper toward me. "First time doing this. Be gentle." I laughed, just a small laugh, but something about him felt honest, human. He told me he was a freelance photographer, that he just moved to town after a rough breakup, and that volunteering made him feel like he was doing something good again. He had that humble, slightly wounded aura that made my heart soften instantly. We talked for an hour after the event ended. He told me stories about capturing sunsets in Arizona, about how his mother used to volunteer at clinics, about wanting to start over. I told him about my work at the community health center, about losing my parents young, about how I'd learned to find joy in small things. Coffee at dawn, laughter, and kindness. He listened. Really listened. It had been years since anyone looked at me like that. From there, everything happened like it was scripted by the universe. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks under the city lights. And one night, while we sat on my apartment balcony, watching rain streak the glass, he kissed me, slow, gentle, like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. Felt real. Felt safe. For the first time in years, I let myself believe in love again. Daniel was thoughtful in all the little ways that mattered. He brought flowers not because it was Valentine's Day, but because he said, "Mondays are harder without color." He'd cook when I came home tired, send texts that made me laugh during stressful shifts, and always said, "I don't care about perfection, I care about presence." He met my friends, charmed my coworkers, even volunteered with me sometimes. Everyone loved him. But looking back now, I see the subtle things I ignored, the moments that didn't quite fit. He was curious about my medical volunteering. Too curious. He asked strange questions like, "So you work with transplant patients too? Or do they usually know their donor personally? And what's the recovery like after something like kidney donation?" At the time, I thought it was just casual curiosity. I mean, I was in healthcare, people ask things like that all the time. But Daniel's curiosity had purpose. And I, blinded by love, couldn't see it. After a year, he proposed. It wasn't grand or dramatic. He did it at home after dinner with a single candle flickering on the table. "I don't want a perfect wedding," he said, eyes shining. "I just want a perfect forever with you." I said yes without hesitation. We married in a small ceremony in our backyard, 30 people, laughter, cheap champagne, and a dance that felt like a promise. Everyone told me I looked radiant that day. But no one saw the look in his eyes, not of passion but calculation. I'd learned later that even our vows were part of his plan. The first year of marriage was beautiful mostly. He made me feel loved, seen, wanted. He'd bring me breakfast in bed, talk about our dreams, kids, traveling, buying a house near the mountains. But sometimes he'd look at me too long, like he was studying me. Other times I'd wake up at night to find him staring into the dark, his mind far away. When I asked what was wrong, he'd just say, "Nothing. Just thinking how lucky I am to have you." I believed him. Every word. Then one afternoon everything changed. We were at his doctor's appointment, a routine checkup, or so I thought. He'd been looking pale for weeks, tired, losing weight. I insisted he get tested. When the doctor came in, his face was serious. He looked at Daniel, then at me. "I'm afraid your kidney function is dangerously low," the doctor said. "You're in stage 4 renal failure. We need to prepare for a transplant soon." The world tilted. I grabbed Daniel's hand, tears filling my eyes. "Oh my God, baby, we'll get through this. I'll do whatever it takes." He squeezed my hand weakly, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Kate. I didn't want you to see me like this." I remember holding him that night, crying into his chest, promising I wouldn't let him go through this alone. I meant every word. Weeks later, tests began, blood type matches, compatibility checks. And then one afternoon the doctor called me into his office. He looked shocked. "Kate," he said carefully, "your husband mentioned he'd like to test you as a potential donor. And surprisingly, you're a perfect match." A perfect match. Felt like fate. Like some cosmic reason we had found each other. I went home shaking with disbelief, half crying, half laughing. "Can you believe it?" I said to him. "I'm a match. I can save you." He hugged me, tears streaming down his face, or so I thought. Now I know those weren't tears of gratitude. They were tears of victory. I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers, went through counseling, endured endless tests and needles. Everyone said I was brave, selfless. But I wasn't brave. I was in love. The surgery was scheduled 3 months later. And in those months Daniel became different. He was overly affectionate, constantly telling me how much he loved me, how I was his angel, his miracle. He wrote me letters, left sticky notes saying things like, "Forever starts when you save me." It felt poetic then. Now it feels sickening. The morning of the surgery, I remember his hand in mine as we were wheeled down the hospital corridor. "I'll never forget what you've done for me," he whispered. "I love you more than life itself." I smiled through tears. "I love you too." Those were the last words we ever said to each other as husband and wife. Because when I woke up, he was gone. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was pain, deep burning pain that crawled up from my side and settled in my chest. The kind of pain that makes you forget where you are, who you are. My throat was dry, my body heavy, and for a few seconds, everything was just white noise. Machines beeping, soft footsteps, distant voices. Then the memory of the surgery hit me like a punch. Daniel. The transplant. I tried to move to call his name, but my voice cracked. The nurse rushed over, smiling softly. "Hey, sweetheart, you're awake. Take it easy." I looked around the room. Empty chair. Empty corner. No flowers. No familiar face. "Where's Daniel?" I whispered. Her smile faltered slightly. "Let me get the doctor, okay?" My heart sank. That's when I knew something was wrong. The doctor came in a few minutes later, flipping through his chart, voice calm but distant. "Surgery went well, Kate. Your husband's procedure was also successful. He was discharged earlier than expected." "Discharged?" I repeated, confused. "But he's supposed to be here. I just woke up." The doctor hesitated. He insisted he felt fine. Said he needed to take care of a few things and would come back for you. That didn't sound like Daniel. He was supposed to be here, holding my hand, crying with relief, thanking me for saving his life. But he wasn't. Days passed. I waited. No calls. No texts. Every nurse who came in said the same thing. "He'll be here soon." But no one could tell me where he was. By the 5th day, the silence became unbearable. I finally called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey baby," I said weakly, voice trembling. "Please call me. I'm worried. I just want to hear your voice." Nothing. I called again. And again. Until finally the message changed. "This number is no longer in service." It felt like the floor had been ripped from under me. When the nurse came to check my vitals, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "He's gone," I said, my voice breaking. "He's gone, isn't he?" She didn't answer at first. Just placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Focus on healing, Kate." But how do you heal when the person you loved most just vanished? After a week I was discharged. My friend Samantha picked me up. She hugged me tightly, and I cried into her shoulder until my bandages were damp. "Kate," she said carefully as she drove me home, "you need to hear something. Daniel. He didn't just leave the hospital. He left town." My stomach turned cold. "What do you mean?" "I went to your house," she said softly. "It's empty. His clothes, his camera, his laptop, everything's gone. I called his old job and they said he quit. His bank account's been closed. And Kate, I checked online." She handed me her phone. There was a post, a missing persons report filed by his supposed sister a year before I met him. Same face, different name. David Monroe. My heart stopped. The man I married wasn't Daniel Walker. He wasn't a photographer from Arizona. He was someone else entirely. The world blurred. I couldn't breathe. "Sam, that's not possible," I whispered. He loved me. We were married. She just looked at me sadly. I don't think he ever loved you, Kate. That night I sat on the floor of my empty house, staring at the wedding photo left hanging on the wall. I could still hear his voice. Forever starts when you save me. I wanted to scream to rip that picture apart, but I couldn't move. My stitches throbbed, my chest ached, and somewhere deep inside, something inside me cracked wide open. Days turned into weeks. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept calling hospitals, transplant coordinators, anyone who might have information. Every time I got the same answer. Privacy laws prevented them from sharing details. All I knew was that my kidney was gone, my husband was gone, and the life I thought I had was just a carefully crafted illusion. One morning a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name written in Daniel's handwriting. My hand shook as I tore it open. Kate, I know you hate me and you have every right to. What I did was unforgivable. But please believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. Just happened. You were kind to me more than anyone ever was. But I had no choice. I was dying and you were my only chance. I'm sorry for everything. Maybe one day you'll understand. Daniel. I read that letter until the paper was soaked with tears. I wanted to believe him, to cling to some piece of the man I thought he was. But then the anger came, deep, raw, righteous anger. Because if he truly loved me, he wouldn't have used me like a donor on legs. He wouldn't have left me bleeding and broken. I went to the police. They took my statement, asked questions, but the officer's eyes said everything. This won't go anywhere. Daniel had vanished. No trace. No identity. No records. The detective assigned to my case, Officer Hensley, tried to comfort me. Men like him, they're chameleons. They target people with access to medical information, learn just enough to fake their way through. You're not the first, Kate. But you might be the first he married. That sentence stuck with me. You might be the first he married. The first. Not the last. I started piecing together everything. Every conversation. Every coincidence. The volunteering event where we met, the way he seemed drawn to my work, how he knew exactly what questions to ask about transplants. It wasn't fate. It was calculation. I wasn't his soulmate. I was his solution. I spent months trying to move on, but trauma doesn't fade. It roots itself in your bones. Every time I touched the scar on my abdomen, I thought of him. Every time I saw a wedding ring, I felt my chest tighten. I started therapy, joined a support group for victims of medical fraud and emotional manipulation. That's where I learned I wasn't alone. One woman had been tricked into donating part of her liver. Another was defrauded by a man who claimed to be terminally ill. It was horrifying and healing in a strange way. Then, almost a year later, something happened that changed everything again. I got a call from a hospital in Texas. The voice on the other end was calm but tense. Is this Mrs. Kate Walker? I hesitated before answering. It's Kate. Yes. This is Dr. Lopez from Dallas General. I believe you should come down here. It's about your husband, or rather, the man you knew as Daniel. My heart stopped. Is he alive? Yes. But you should hurry. I flew to Texas the next day, trembling with 1,000 emotions. Anger, fear, hope, hate. When I walked into that hospital room, I saw him lying there, pale and weak, connected to machines. Older, thinner, but unmistakably him. He looked at me with surprise and shame. Kate, you came. I wanted to scream at him, to tear the IVs out, to make him feel the pain he caused. But all I could say was, why? Why did you do this to me? He turned his face away, tears forming in his eyes. Because I was dying. And no one cared. I found your file through a friend at the clinic. You were a match. I thought I'd trick you, get what I needed and disappear. But then I fell in love with you. I swear, Kate, I did. Love. I spat the word out. You call that love? You lied about everything. You married me for my kidney, not my heart. He coughed, his voice breaking. I was desperate. And then, I couldn't stop. You made me want to live. I stood there, shaking. Every emotion I'd buried came flooding back. Love, rage, sorrow, disgust. You didn't want to live, I said quietly. You wanted to survive. There's a difference. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, he whispered, I never stopped loving you, Kate. I stopped. For a moment I almost believed him. Then I remembered the empty house, the voicemail, the scars. Then you should have stayed, I said softly. Because love doesn't run away once it gets what it wants. And I walked out, leaving him behind, this time for good. Outside the hospital, I sat in the car and cried until there were no tears left. My body felt lighter somehow, as if the truth had finally burned through the last of the lies. But I didn't know then that the story wasn't over. Because 2 weeks later, I'd get a call that would break me all over again. A call that would reveal the final, most horrifying part of his plan. 2 weeks after I saw Daniel for the last time, I got a call that changed everything again. I was at home, finally trying to rebuild some kind of normal. I had just started cooking for myself again, reading books, going on short walks, small things that made me feel human. Then my phone rang. The caller ID said Dallas Police Department. My chest tightened instantly. Ms. Walker, the voice said. This is Detective Alvarez from the Dallas PD. I'm calling regarding David Monroe, also known as Daniel Walker. My throat went dry. What about him? There was a pause on the other end. I'm afraid he passed away last night. For a moment the world went silent. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I sank into the chair, gripping the phone like it was the only thing holding me to reality. He's dead. Yes, ma'am, the detective continued. Complications from organ failure. But there's something you need to know. During the investigation of his belongings we found a safety deposit key, and inside that box there were documents with your name on them. We'd like you to come in. I flew to Dallas the next morning. My hands shook the entire time. Part of me wanted to scream at his memory, part of me wanted closure, and a small broken part still wanted to understand why. At the police station, Detective Alvarez greeted me with a look that mixed pity and respect. He handed me a sealed envelope. We thought you deserved to see this. He left a letter. And something else. Inside the envelope were 3 things. A folded letter, a USB drive, and a photo, our wedding photo. He kept it all this time. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Kate, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth, all of it. I didn't just marry you because you were a match. I married you because someone paid me to. The words blurred. I felt my chest tighten. There was a man, a medical broker. He found patients who needed transplants and couldn't wait for the system. He paid me to find donors who didn't know they were being used. You were supposed to be one of them. But when I met you, everything changed. I fell in love with you. I told him I couldn't go through with it, that I wanted out. He threatened me. Said if I didn't follow through, he'd expose me, ruin us both. So I went through with the marriage, with the transplant, and then I ran. I thought if I disappeared, you'd be safe. But he found me again. I tried to hide, but I couldn't. I've been sick ever since. Maybe this is karma. Maybe it's justice. But please believe this, I never stopped loving you. You were the only real thing in my life. Daniel. My vision blurred with tears. My hands went cold. I felt sick. Paid to find donors? A black market transplant broker? My marriage hadn't just been a lie, it was part of a criminal operation. I turned to the detective, my voice shaking. Is this true? Was he working for someone? Alvarez nodded grimly. We believe so. We've been tracking a man involved in illegal organ trafficking for years. Your husband's note confirms what we suspected. He was part of it, but it seems he tried to back out. The USB drive may have evidence. I watched as they plugged it into the computer. Folder after folder opened, medical forms, forged donor consent papers, photographs of people who looked as lost as I once had. My stomach twisted when I saw my own name in one of the files. My blood type. My records. My signature, copied and pasted. It hit me like a physical blow. He was going to sell my kidney, I whispered. The detective looked at me softly. It looks that way. But it also looks like he didn't. He used it for himself instead. Which means, in a strange way, he saved you from something even worse. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Everything inside me felt shattered: grief, disgust, pity, rage. For days after that meeting I couldn't sleep. I'd close my eyes and see his face, hear his voice, remember the way he said forever starts when you save me. It all made sense now. He didn't just mean saving his life. He meant saving him from the people who owned him. I thought I'd feel relief knowing the truth. But all I felt was emptiness. Because even though he had used me, lied to me, and betrayed every part of who I was, a small piece of me still loved him. And that realization was the cruelest cut of all. A few weeks later, I received a package in the mail from the police. Inside was Daniel's old camera, the same one he always carried when we were together. They said it was found in his hospital room, that it technically belonged to me as next of kin. I almost didn't want to open it. But that night, sitting alone on my couch, I finally did. The memory card inside had hundreds of photos, sunsets, cityscapes, hospital corridors. And then I found one folder labeled K. Inside were pictures of me, laughing, cooking, reading, sleeping. Some were candid, some were from moments I didn't even remember. And in every single one, the way he looked at me through that lens, it wasn't fake. It was love. Twisted, broken, selfish love. But love nonetheless. I cried for hours. Not for the man he was, but for the man he could have been if he'd chosen differently. Months passed. I started speaking at victim advocacy events, telling my story to others so they'd recognize the warning signs, the too perfect charm, the emotional intensity, the subtle questions. People called me brave. I never felt brave. I just didn't want anyone else to lose more than they could give. The scar on my side healed, but the one inside me never did. Still, I learned to live with it. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without letting it destroy you. One evening about a year later, I stood by the ocean at sunset, the same kind of golden light Daniel used to love photographing. I held his camera in my hands. For the first time, I pointed it toward the horizon and pressed the shutter. The sound clicked softly like a heartbeat. I whispered into the wind, "You took my kidney, Daniel. But you didn't take my heart. You don't get to keep that." The breeze carried my words away, and I let the camera fall around my neck. The waves crashed, the sky turned crimson, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Love had betrayed me, but it had also taught me the hardest truth of all, that sometimes the person who breaks you also frees you. I turned from the shore, my hand brushing the scar that marked everything I'd lost, and everything I'd survived. Because in the end, he didn't marry me for my heart. He took my kidney. But he left me with something far more powerful. A story no one would ever forget. And that's how I found my closure. Not in his apology, not in justice, but in my own survival. Because I'm Kate. I'm 38 years old. And I'm still here. Alive. Whole. And stronger than ever.